Okay, it's 2 p.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started here. I know folks are still filing in, but good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marvin Johnson. I manage the Audit Link team here at CU Answers. I am your host for today. Thanks for joining me. This is abnormal activity monitoring using the tools you own. And today, we're going to be walking through how to configure transaction patterns in the abnormal activity monitoring toolset. Now, since I'm unable to use live data, I put together this presentation, but this should still get us to our intended destination, which is to get you more familiar and comfortable with using this powerful tool. Now, as always, please utilize the chat feature for questions, and I'll try to address those at the end. And yes, I will be making this presentation available. There will be a recording, and I'm actually going to put some links in the chat to where you'll be able to find those once they've been uploaded. So I'm going to do that right now. All right, so we're going to tool number 101. And we're selecting the transaction patterns option. Now, I've already done 2 or 3 webinars on this tool thus far, where I went through in pretty good detail about how to navigate, and I provided an overview of the design of the tool. So if you missed that, you can access the recordings via that on-demand link I left in the chat. All right. Now, right now, there's 30 pre-configured patterns available. So if you were to go out to tool 101, you'd see all 30. We're actually going to walk through configuring this highlighted pattern right here. This is a velocity pattern, and it's looking to uncover a high velocity of ACH activity. So we're going to select that and then click Edit. All right. Once we're in this panel, we can now make adjustments to the instruction streams. And what we're essentially doing is setting the thresholds by which member accounts will be flagged. So this is set to flag accounts with 8 or more ACH transactions that occurred on a single day. And then we're placing a floor of $5,000. So what we're saying here is we're not concerned if it's less than that amount. And you can see that we can do this for individual memberships or organizational memberships. So once we've set it how we want it, we're going to click Save Update. Okay, so you might be asking, how do you determine how many transactions to watch for? How do you determine the number of days and the dollar threshold? Well, the answer is it depends. And it depends on what's considered normal for your credit union, paired with a little bit of judgment. So think of this as an iterative process where you might not nail it on the first try. And as a matter of fact, if you're doing it right, you probably won't nail it the first time. But I'm showing you a tool right now that can help you determine what might be considered abnormal for your credit union. This is tool number 775. 775. And it allows you to see the number of transactions conducted by each member by origin during the prior month. So we can see August here. All right, and we're going to be using ACH for our example today. Okay, so I really like this tool because I can see that there's a bit of separation between the first and second accounts here. You can see this. The member with the most ACHs did 177, and the second most was 124, which is the widest gap amongst the membership. So you can analyze that a few ways, but I basically took the 177 and divided by the 31 days in August, and that gives us about 6 transactions per day, 6 transactions per day. So that gives us a bit of a barometer. Well, what about dollars, Marvin? What about dollars? All right, I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you asked. There's a really useful dashboard that you can access from the member's account. Okay, so I like to take the member with the most activity. So that would be the one with the 177 ACH transactions. Go into their account and click on transaction activity. It'll bring you to this dashboard. And this dashboard gives you a 3-month snapshot of that member's activity by origin, which is super useful. But what we want to do is click on compare all members. Compare all members. All right, now check this out. So in the ACH origin, the overall average for all members is about $3,500, and that's taking the absolute value or aggregation of the debits and the credits. That's actually how the tool looks at dollars when flagging accounts. So again, you can see how this can prove useful in setting that dollar threshold floor. Now, back to the pattern that we configured. So we have a basis. We have a basis for the 8 transactions and the 5K. They weren't just plucked out of the air. So when it comes to determining how many days you want to target, at this point, for me, it really makes the most sense to do 1 day. Now, as this process matures and we learn more ways to just extract more from this powerful tool, using a wider range of days may make sense. But what I've noticed so far is that you'll end up seeing accounts appearing on multiple days for the exact same activity if you use greater than 1 day. So again, for now, in most cases, I'm entering 1 day here, 1 day. All right, now that we set the config for this pattern, we can go ahead and run a test. And this allows us to get real-time feedback on the changes we just made without running the tool on all of the patterns, all 30. And that's just gonna cut down on time tremendously. So let's select the pattern. And again, we're gonna do the uncover high velocity ACH activity. And then we're gonna click on run a test, run a test. Okay, so bear with me here for a second. Let's say instead of the 8 transactions with a floor of $5,000, let's say you set the threshold at 4 transactions on 1 day with a floor of $1,000. Well, you can see that this particular credit union will end up with 39 accounts to review just for this one pattern, just for this 1 day. I'd say that's way too many. And most of these are likely false positives with normal activity. So we would definitely need to go back to the drawing board here. But take note of this account with the 40 transactions, 40 ACH transactions on 1 day, totaling the 7,800. We're gonna revisit that one in a little bit. Okay, so here's what the results look like with the 8 transactions on 1 day with a $5,000 floor. And you can see that it's greatly reduced the number of accounts that populate here. So instead of the 39, we have 2. And we're still capturing the account with the 40 ACH transactions on one day. So, so as you can tell, this isn't a sort of check the box kind of process, but once you've done it a few times, it does become intuitive in a way, and it'll likely require a few iterations before you get it where you want it. But as you're doing this, ask yourself these questions. Does it appear that the thresholds are set too low? Are we pulling in too many accounts? If yes, you need to go back to the drawing board and adjust the configuration. And you can do as many iterations of that as you deem necessary. You're in a test environment, you can change those configs and see how those changes affect what populates here. Now, once you're comfortable with the configuration based on your testing, you're going to pull up the config tracking sheet and record the thresholds you set. Now, this document is available in a workbook that you can download for free right now, right from the Audit Link store. And I'm going to actually leave a link to the store right now. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to leave this in the chat. Go. Okay. Now, you can go right, using that link, you can go right to the Audit Link store and download these templates. There's a booklet out there as well that walks you through this process, and that is also free. Okay. All right. So, so you just locate the pattern, and this is the B7 ACH DLY. Once again, the uncover high velocity ACH activity pattern. You're going to enter your initials, enter the threshold figures in these yellow fields here, and these are what we entered into tool 101. You're going to record, record the date of the change, and this is important. And then you can add some notes about the results you achieved here. And this is just reflecting how many accounts appeared on the dates that I ran tests, on, okay? All right. And you just basically do that for each pattern you're adjusting. Now, if you were to scroll to the right within this sheet, there's additional columns for when you make a change in the future. So if you were to change the configuration at a later date. So you can see here how this is providing you with a method for documenting that before and after, right? Okay. So you've adjusted and documented the pattern configuration. Now you can go into tool 537 and actually run the tool against all of the patterns that you configured. And any account that triggers one or more of the configured patterns will appear in tool number 537. Okay. All right. Now, you can see that there are a total of 22 accounts in the dashboard here across all of the 30 patterns that were set up and the ones that actually were triggered. And each of these accounts that you see in the dashboard has triggered one or more patterns. Now, here's that 40 transactions that I've highlighted again. And that's the one we're going to use for our walkthrough example. But a little bit more about the 22 accounts. So some of you may be thinking, there is no way I can review 22 accounts every day. I hear you, but this is why this initial review process is critical, because it'll help you prune down the population to reduce the number of false positives being flagged, because that's the true goal here, not necessarily to reduce the number of accounts to review per se, but to reduce the number of accounts that actually have normal activity. We don't want to flag those. Now, you can't eliminate them completely, but you can tweak the configuration enough to limit them, All right. Now, this document is also in that workbook I mentioned, available right now on the AuditLink store. And this is where you can document your review of the accounts that appear in the dashboard. So when you run Tool 537, you have your population of accounts here. As you review those, you can use this document to record your conclusions and results. All right, so let's go ahead and review that account I keep showing you. Okay, so as you can see, those 40 ACH transactions are predominantly made up of PayPal transfers, And so at this point, you'd want to review the surrounding activity in the account. So you want to determine how this activity is being funded. Is it payroll via direct deposit? Is it cash? Is there movement between outside accounts, et cetera, et cetera? You're basically determining whether you'd flag this as a high-risk account. You might even want to file a SAR, or you might just want to flag it for ongoing monitoring to keep an eye on it for a while. If you don't observe anything suspicious, however, you might consider it a false positive because we pulled in an account with normal activity. So it really depends on what you see during your review. And again, you can't eliminate all false positives, but that's why you'd likely want to run the tool and review the accounts for at least a 2 to 3 day period in order to really establish what that false positive rate is. And the last spreadsheet in the workbook will facilitate that piece, and we'll look at that in a moment. So, was this account worthy of review? I'd say absolutely. Now, we can't see this, but I reviewed this account previously. There's also Cash App and Venmo activity, which is just a little bit unusual to have more than one P2P app being used this frequently. The account is mainly funded by payroll, but there's also some sizable transfers coming in through these mobile payment apps. And at a minimum, I'd say put a due diligence flag on this one and continue to monitor the activity at a minimum. Could this be business activity through a personal account? Or is the member layering funds to and from one or more outside accounts? What's the true source of these funds? It's the ambiguity that can make us uncomfortable here. So, as you conduct your account review, once again, we're back to this document here. You can utilize this account review sheet to record your conclusions. And here's the account again. There's the account that we reviewed, the 40 transactions, ACH transactions on the 1 day. We're entering the date of the activity, the review date, what the pattern is, account number and trigger, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can add some review notes here and then check off whether it was worthy of review or a false positive. And you do that for every account that you review, Now, when these 3 documents are used together, what you have is a change management process for transaction pattern configurations. Examiners are very likely to have interest in how changes to configurations are being managed. What was the configuration prior to the change? What kind of results were you getting prior to the change? How did the change affect results? Are high-risk accounts that would have been flagged under a prior configuration not being flagged now? So this final document is where you determine the false positive rate. And this gives you a documented basis for adjusting the thresholds with the sole purpose of reducing false positives. So it doesn't appear that you're making changes willy-nilly. So this example is showing us the percentage of false positives by pattern over the course of 3 days. So let's say we ran the tool over the span of 3 days and we reviewed the accounts. Now that period can be longer, of course, or maybe even shorter if it's abundantly obvious that the config is pulling in too many accounts. So you just find the pattern. So for example, we were doing the V7 ACH DLY. There's the excessive ACH activity again. So you just find the pattern, enter the activity dates, then the number of accounts that were reviewed on those that triggered that particular pattern. And then you're going to come over here and you're going to enter how many were actually worthy of review, how many were actually false positives, and that will give you a ratio here. Okay. So this first one here has a 100% false positive rate. So we're justifiably going to raise the threshold to pull in fewer accounts. Similar for this second one here with an 80% rate. And then for this last one, we actually reviewed a total of 2 accounts, but both were worthy of review. So we won't make any changes to the config for that pattern. Looks like that one's dialed in fairly well. All right. Now, you're going to come back to the config tracking sheet and record any adjustments that you're making. And now I know this seems like a lot of work because it kind of is. Believe me, I know. But you should only need to go through this process once a year or so. It's not something you'll be doing every week, right? When you do adjust the patterns again, you start a new column. You can see that here. You're going to record the date of the change, and you know the rest. So you can see we know what the patterns were configured as of this date. We know what they were when they changed. We have a document that has recorded our review and the false positive rate. Okay, so once again, in concert, this is going to provide you with a way of justifying your changes. Okay, so once again, once you've really got your patterns dialed in, you won't have to go through this documentation process. It'll just be a matter of reviewing the accounts as frequently as you deem necessary. And you can do that as often as daily. Just a quick word about what we will cover in the next session. We're going to pretty much pick up where we left off here. So we're going to go through some best practices after the configuration has been dialed in. We're going to talk about how to incorporate the use of due diligence codes. We're going to talk about some reporting capabilities, use of the trackers to document your review. And I may add to that agenda as we get closer to that next session. But at a minimum, we're going to touch on these items. And once again, this tool is available for your use right now. But I also want to make you aware of some things that AuditLink will be offering very soon. We're targeting mid-October to launch a configuration service where we would go in and dial in your patterns for you. And we're also looking to have a full account review service, looking to offer that in early 2022. There's going to be more info to come on that, on both of those in the coming weeks and months. But if you have interest or questions about either, feel free to reach out, and I'll make sure to circle back with you as we get closer to going live. And my contact information, I believe I have that at the end of the presentation. And then one other thing before we get to your questions, when you go out to the AuditLink store, this is where you'll actually find the tile for the free booklet and the change management workbook. Okay, let's see what questions you have here. I'm going to pull up the chat. All right, and start from the top here. Okay, came into the meeting after the original link to the on-demand recording. Can you please share again? Okay, yep, I can do that. Share again, certainly. Okay, there's that. Next, what do we have here? Should a tracker be created on the member account and noted on the worksheet? You can do it that way. That might be a little bit of a duplication of efforts. The intention for that first go round is really to determine how you need to adjust your configuration. But if you're noting things that you actually want to monitor during that process, absolutely. You can go ahead and create a tracker so that is attached to that member account. It's a good question. Okay, why are some of the transactions duplicated day after day? Okay, so that's going back to what I was talking through regarding the config. And actually, let me see if I can pull that up so we can look at that together. Here. Okay. So what I'm getting at here, if you were to change this to watch for 8 or more transactions during a period of, let's say, 3 days, okay, what it's going to do is it's going to flag that account likely for those 3 days. So if you ran the tool for the next 3 days, you will likely see that account appear because it's taking the total that's occurring over that 3-day period. Now, it depends on the pattern. It does depend on the pattern. But like I said, at this point, I think as a general rule, it's best to start with 1 day. And as we use this tool more and get better at it, get better at the configs, then we can start looking at extending those days. But in my initial testing, there was a lot of duplication. So to cut down on that, my recommendation is to set this at 1 day at this point. But again, you can play around with this. This is the other idea with running a test, right? You can play around with this. You can make changes and see pretty much real time how that affects things. So you could totally enter 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, and go back in time to see what happens, right? So you can select, let me see if I can find that dashboard. So you can see here, you can select a day here. So you could go back, to the beginning of the month or whenever, and step through each day to see what happens when you change that one day to multiple days. So a lot of options here. Okay, does CUA provide assistance in setting up configurations for our CU or service we would be charged for our CUA to set up the configurations? Okay, yep. So Janet, yep, like I mentioned, we're in the process right now of, our plan is to launch a service offering next month. As you can see, there's a little bit to this. So we definitely are here to help any credit union that would like the help. So, yep, absolutely. And then in addition to the configuration service, we're going to be looking to actually, similar to what we do right now for many of the credit unions on the call, for daily log management services, employee audits, even vendor management. So quite similar to what we're doing in those regards. Okay, so as you showed in the example, do you think using the top number in each of these categories divided out by the number of days in the month is the best place to start? Tanya, I would say yes. Now, again, we're pretty early on. So I could say maybe in the next 3 to 6 months, I may come up with some other sort of ways of getting there. But yeah, at this point, I think that's a good best practice. But remember, and let me go back to that slide here. Where is it? Here. But you could even look at this and say, well, the widest gap was between 124 and 177. So maybe our threshold is somewhere in the middle, right? You could totally say that as well. So there's a couple ways you can kind of think through this. And also, if, let's say we took a look at this account and determined that, it's really nothing too crazy happening in the account. But let's say we looked at this one, 124, and there was something that, I don't know, I think I'd rather take a look at that one. So it just kind of depends. But to be clear, yes, the member with the highest number of transactions, I think, is a good starting point. Okay, I guess I asked my questions too. That's okay, Janet. We were on the same wavelength. That's all. We're thinking the same way. That's good. Okay, will hired audit link for employee transactions, file maintenance, and BSA monitoring? Will abnormal activity monitoring be added as an option to this service? Correction, we hire. Yes, Tony. So once again, this is going to be an option. I have been working very hard. Trust me, I have. I've been putting a lot of time into this because this tool is a game changer. Some of you may be using, a third party. I won't mention any names. One of them starts with a V, okay? And I've been telling this story over and over, and I believe I'm going to have more examples than just this one story, but I'm going to tell it again. So through the sort of beta process and developing the service, right, working with a fairly large credit union, and came across an account that had 28 ACH transactions on one day for $174,000. Yeah, yep. So went in, took a look at the activity, and it was pretty much all DraftKings and BetMGM, and you get the idea. So gambling, wee bit of a problem there, I think. Now, you guys aren't in the business of telling your members, as no financial institution is, on how to spend their money. But what does kind of perk up your spidey senses, is there any exposure to the credit union? Does the member have a line of credit? Are they making draws from that line of credit? Do they have a credit card? How are they paying on these? So $174,000 in one day is quite a bit. Now, this credit union utilizes a third-party system. Name begins with a V. Did not flag this account. So that was an initial example for me to say, wow, this tool is already doing something that that third-party software cannot do. And I believe as we get, more mature with this process, or I should say, as the process matures, I think we'll have more instances of that. So, so yeah. Let's see, do we have any other questions? Okay, that was all of the questions I saw in the chat. Does anyone have anything else? Anything else? And actually, I think I was sending the on-demand link to Julie alone. Let me redo that. My apologies. Let me check back through here and make sure I didn't do that every time. Okay, good. 2 more messages. Okay, when is the next conference? I can tell you that. Just 1 second here. Next one is scheduled for October 28th. October 28th, and that will be at 3 p.m. So stay on the lookout for a news alert so that you can get registered for that event. Okay. Oh, is it 2 p.m.? 2 p.m. Oh, yes, correct. Thank you, Julie. Thank you. 2 p.m. Okay, anything else? You mentioned a follow-up webinar. How do we find that? When is the next conference? Okay, looks like that's it. So if you have questions, have some interest, please reach out, give me a call, or you can shoot me an email, which I didn't leave there. It's just marvin.johnson@cuanswers.com. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining me today, and make it a great one, and hope to see you next time.